I was walking home from the gym, feeling energized and accomplished after a great workout. As I turned the corner onto my street, I noticed a car parked in front of my house, blocking my driveway. I didn't recognize the car, but assumed it must belong to a neighbor who had parked in the wrong spot. As I approached the car, I noticed a woman sitting in the driver's seat, talking on her phone. I politely tapped on the window and gestured for her to move her car. She rolled down the window and glared at me. "I'll move when I'm ready," she spat, continuing her phone call. I was taken aback by her rudeness, but tried to stay calm. "I need to get into my driveway. Could you please move your car?" She huffed and rolled up the window, ignoring me completely. I was getting frustrated but didn't want to cause a scene. Instead, I decided to call the non-emergency police line for help. While I was on the phone, the woman in the car got out and began yelling at me. "Who do you think you are, calling the cops on me? This is my spot. I can park here if I want." I tried to explain that it was my driveway, but she wouldn't listen. She continued to berate me, getting closer and closer until she was practically in my face. I could feel my heart racing and my hands shaking, but I refused to back down. "You're being ridiculous," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just move your car and we can all go on with our day." She laughed in my face. "You think you're so entitled, don't you? Well, you're not. You don't own the street. You don't own the world. Get over yourself." I was stunned by her words, but before I could respond, she lunged at me. I stumbled backwards, narrowly avoiding her fist. She continued to swing wildly, screaming obscenities and insults. I tried to defend myself, but it was like fighting a tornado. Thankfully, the police arrived just in time to break up the fight. They took one look at the woman, who was now foaming at the mouth with rage, and immediately handcuffed her. "You're under arrest for assault," one of the officers said, leading her away. As they drove her off, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. It was clear that she had a long history of entitlement and aggression, and I was glad that she was finally facing consequences for her actions. Reflecting on the incident, I realized that I had been too quick to assume that the woman in the car was just a confused neighbor. In reality, she was a bully who had no respect for anyone else's rights or feelings. But I also realized that I had stood up for myself, even when it was scary and uncomfortable. I had refused to back down in the face of intimidation, and that made me proud. I had always enjoyed my quiet life in the suburbs. The peaceful atmosphere and the friendly neighbors made it the perfect place to retire. However, my peaceful life was about to be disrupted by one entitled neighbor. It all started when a new family moved in next door. They were loud, obnoxious, and extremely entitled. The mother, in particular, was a real piece of work. She would constantly demand that the entire neighborhood cater to her every whim. One day, I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the sun when I saw her approaching. She marched up to me, her eyes blazing with fury. "Excuse me, but I need to borrow your lawnmower," she said, not even bothering to introduce herself. I was taken aback. I barely knew this woman, and she was already demanding to use my property. "Sorry, I can't lend it to you. I need it for my own lawn," I replied politely. "Well, I don't care. I need it now, and you're going to give it to me," she snapped. I was shocked by her audacity, but I stood my ground. "I'm sorry, but no, I can't let you use it. You'll have to find another way." That's when she lost it. She started screaming at me, calling me all sorts of names and accusing me of being selfish. I tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't listen. Eventually, she stormed off, still shouting insults at me. I thought that was the end of it, but it was just the beginning. From that day on, she would make my life a living hell. She would blast loud music at all hours of the day and night, park her car in my driveway, and even throw trash into my yard. One day, I had had enough. I decided to confront her and put an end to her entitled behavior. I marched over to her house, determined to give her a piece of my mind. When I got there, I found her sitting on her porch, sipping a cocktail. She looked up at me and smirked. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Yes, you can. I want you to stop harassing me and my family," I said, trying to keep my cool. "Harassing you? I'm not doing anything of the sort. "You're just being paranoid," she replied, taking a sip of her drink. "That's not true, and you know it. You've been parking in my driveway and throwing trash into my yard. That's harassment," I said, my anger starting to boil. She just laughed. "Oh, please, you're making a big deal out of nothing. It's not like I'm hurting anyone." I had had enough of her smug attitude. I decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. "You know what? You're right. It's not like you're hurting anyone. So I guess it's okay if I park in your driveway and throw trash into your yard, right?" She looked shocked, but I could see the anger building in her eyes. "How dare you? You're not allowed to do that," she shouted, standing up from her chair. "Why not? If it's okay for you to do it, then it's okay for me too, right?" I said, enjoying the look of frustration on her face. That's when she lost it. She charged at me, fists clenched and ready to strike. I backed away, trying to avoid her blows. Thankfully, a neighbor had called the police, and they arrived just in time to break up the fight. The entitled mother was arrested for assault, and I never heard from her again. The neighborhood was peaceful once more, and I could finally relax on my porch without any disturbances. I later found out that the entitled mother had a long history of entitled behavior. She had been banned from several stores in the area for causing scenes and demanding special treatment. Her husband was just as bad, constantly yelling at the kids and berating anyone who crossed him. Another story for another time. In any case, I learned a valuable lesson from that experience. I learned that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself and not let others walk all over you. It may be uncomfortable and even scary, but it's necessary to maintain your dignity and self-respect. So, in 2004, in my second year of college, I had to get a job to balance money out. You know how it is, buying food, college stuff, and partying. I took a PT job at the toy store with the giraffe. You know the one. Anyway, a certain boy wizard was popular. The toys were gold dust. People were literally fighting in the aisle to get certain figures, playsets, etc. One morning, a delivery came in of a certain figure. The hen's teeth of figures, apparently. I took a call from a pissed-off-sounding dad looking for this figure. Since I was front desk, I handled these types of calls. He sounded beyond pissed, saying he'd call all the stores in town to find this one figure for his daughter and asked, begged, then demanded we keep one aside. I told him we couldn't do that as this delivery was delayed due to B's reasons, and it was first come, first served. He went off saying if he comes down there and this figure was sold out, he'd beat me up. I placed him on hold, transferred him to my boss, and hung up. 15 minutes later, my boss storms out of his office and makes a beeline to me, screaming I should never transfer calls to him. Which was nonsense, because I got told many times if someone threatens you or swears, transfer. Also, I should keep back a few of these HP toys. Apparently, this guy said I swore at him was extremely rude and unhelpful and was too lazy to do his job. So I picked out the figures, set them aside, and waited. 35 minutes later, this jerk shows up and asks if the delivery came in, then demands to get the figures. I just handed over the figures and wished him a good day. He stood there with a look that could kill demands to see my supervisor. So I called one over. This douchebag tells her I was extremely rude, unhelpful, and dismissive. Luckily, my coworker was there to set this right. The jerk didn't like this and demanded the figures for free. Long story short, he was kicked out and barred. I got pulled into the boss's office and told to be nicer and be a team player. I had it at this and told him to stick to his job. Threw down my name badge and left. Never work retail. It's not worth it. First things first, I have no sense of direction, and I am prone to getting lost. This all started a few years ago, and honestly, it is one of my funniest lost stories. Well, I was traveling to go visit my mother. She gave me directions, however. I am super terrible at them. I, however, had gotten far enough to get to a light railway. My mother often described taking one to work. I was busy reading things when the entitled people of our story walked up. I figured out my directions and went to the automatic ticket booth. I paid for my ticket. Then I stared at the machine, trying to read this strange punch thing next to it. An older man said to me, loud enough for anyone to hear. You put your ticket in there for it to get a timestamp. If you don't, it isn't valid and you can get in trouble during inspections. So I stamped the ticket like the man said. The train got there and everyone got on. I found a seat in a front corner as the group of entitled people chose a bunch of seats in the back of this small carriage. They were loud as they blasted some rap music and were laughing. A few stops in and I was already lost and staring at the rail map near the door, trying to make heads or tails out of it. That is when the cops came on. They announced it was an inspection and to get our tickets out. A cop comes over to me and notices I had my ticket tucked slightly under my cap to hold it in place, but to show it off just in case. He speaks briefly to me and I tell him I am lost and I will be getting off at the next stop to figure out my way to my mother's. The other cop called the one talking to me over and the rap music stopped. I could hear some arguing, but in truth, I wasn't interested at this point. The next stop came, so I got up and got off and headed straight to the map. I only paused as I heard some shouts and what sounded like a fight starting. The cops were ushering this group from before off the train. They were all shouting at the cops with slurs and what seemed to be stupid things. I thought I wasn't involved, so I went to the map. Oh, how wrong I was. I was listening so that I could figure out if I had to move. The cops got them seated and informed them that they needed to buy tickets to ride the rail, that they could get off with a warning if they buy and stamp their tickets now. Why aren't you telling her that? She's with us, one of them snapped. I looked over to them to see a guy pointing at me and the cop looked at me, then calmly said, "She paid for her ticket, and she isn't with you. I already know this." "Yes, she is. Arrest her," one of the females said while pointing at me. The cop sighed. "She doesn't look like she is with you. If she is with you, where is she headed?" the cop asked them. He was right. Not only were we not seated together or talking to each other, I was wearing clothes with anime stuff on them, while all of the group had some band on their shirts. The whole group shouted something that sounded like the name of a band. The other cop, whom spoke to me before, said, "She's not. Now buy your tickets." I just sighed and turned my head back to the map. For the next 5 minutes, the group still insisted I was with them and that I should be arrested. They also refused to pay for new tickets. I was getting annoyed hearing them, so I got closer to the map and tried harder to ignore them. Until I heard it. Bam! The sound of someone getting punched. I looked over and the person who was pointing at me first had just slugged one of the cops and was now being tackled by the other. I watched as the cop who got punched ordered backup as he stood up to try to rein in the rest of the group who were also trying to fight him. Everything happened so fast, but soon there were more cops. They came in, placed each of them in handcuffs, and took them away. I watched as they left, and they were still shouting, "Arrest her! She's with us!" as if they had practiced it. I just stood there dumbfounded, not even sure how to process what had happened. My mom appeared a few seconds later. It seems like I got lost right at the stop she took when she was returning from work. She noticed the police cars and asked me if I knew what happened. I told her, and she laughed. "Only you would get someone arrested by saying and doing nothing. I never saw those people again, thank God."